So, moving on to our next speaker for the day, let me introduce to you Fire Sia. So, Fire is part of the BPO workforce. He has been in LGBT advocacy for 20 years in various LGBT orgs. Professionally, he has experience as a writer, corporate trainer, and also as a public speaker. Currently, Fire is a training and quality director in one of the Philippines' largest BPO companies and is supporting various industry verticals. In 2020, he published his first literary compilation, The Scent of Flowers. I'm personally very excited for this topic. So, talking about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, here is
Yes.
Fire Sia.
So, hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's amazing to be part of this event. And today we are going to talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. A huge issue right now really is how we can make ourselves better as employers and how we can make our work environment better for all our diverse employees. So, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and so that I can start. Okay. So I decided to make my talk a little bit light so that it won't be so, you know, crazy heavy. And that's exactly why my title is It's 2021 and This Kid is All Right. And this is going to be a brief discussion on employment equality and diversity and inclusion. So, first of all, let me go ahead and introduce myself through this presentation. It started in 1998. In 1998, I had just graduated from college. I got my degree, and I was finally ready for the workforce, right? So I wanted to make sure that I could get a job in corporate. I wanted to do all those things, right? And so in 1998, I submitted my resume across several companies. And there was one particular company that I wanted to join. So I'm actually a media production major. So I had, a huge interest in film, in movies, in TV, and in the media. And this company was a media company. So I submitted my resume, really excited. I had great grades, graduated, with pretty good credentials, I might say. So I was very confident, right, that I would probably at least get to a final interview, right? And they were looking for new grads, so that's exactly what I was looking forward to. Unfortunately, the person who interviewed me returned the resume and said, I'm sorry, but we don't have anything here for you. So okay, and that was fine. I mean, absolutely, everybody gets rejected. It's okay. But one thing that I noticed on the resume when it was returned to me is that there was actually a note on the top part of the resume that said lesbian, and I'm like, what? What? And then to top it off, there was this circle around the word lesbian, and this just really, this did not sit well with me. And I was very young. I was 21 years old. And then I told myself, and this was in 1998, and I said, this is not going to work for me, right? I mean, what am I going to do? I needed a job. I couldn't, continue some of the small jobs I was doing. I needed something more consistent. So I've decided to, rebrand myself, recreate myself just so that I can find work, right? And I decided to shove myself back into my closet, stay hidden, pretend to be someone that I wasn't so that I could actually find something, in the corporate world and essentially live in a lie. I took major steps to do this. I I wore dresses to my interviews. I wore makeup to my interviews. I made sure that I was more feminine, right? Because I am assigned female at birth. And this is what they saw, right, on my resume. And finally, I got a job and it was really exciting, right? But it was hard. I was in a skirt 4 days a week because there was a company uniform. And, I pretty much had to have two lives. I had my work life and I had my actual life, right? My authentic side, which, you know, was very much hidden. And then I decided, one day that this cannot happen and there are people who are like me out there, and it's impossible, you know, that they can stay like this. So what did I do? Right, I decided that I wanted to live my truth and be who I was. So to live my truth, I had to come out, I had to be seen, and I had to be heard. Right. And this led me to a life of being visible so that I could be an advocate, and I could also be an activist, right, about employment equality, LGBT plus rights. And this also led me to education, which basically meant that now my advocacy really is to educate people about diversity and inclusion and what it can do to make your workplace great, right? So this is me. My name is Fire. My pronouns are he, his, they, and them. I am actually bisexual, and I'm also transgender. And it's 2021, and I'm actually doing great, and I am all right. So let's go ahead and start with looking at how we can drive inclusivity leading to employment equality. And we're going to start with a question, right? What is an inclusive workplace? An inclusive workplace, has a welcoming workplace culture where everyone is treated with respect, with dignity, and this is, regardless of, their age, their sex, right? Regardless of their gender identity, regardless of all those things, so that they can feel valued in the organization. An inclusive workplace is representative, right, of the diverse members of the workplace community or the employee community, where there are actually policies in place, concerning equality and human rights, great working conditions, your dignity at work, your welfare as an employee, and even going down to recruitment and hiring policies. Because at the end of the day, diversity and inclusion includes the employees through the end-to-end process, right, of getting a job, in a diverse workplace somewhere where they will be comfortable being themselves. And knowing that, we have to understand that to make it truly inclusive, we need to ensure that members of staff, right, at all levels, and this is, including leadership and leaders in the community, in the corporate community, that these folks are aware of the inclusive values of the organization, they're consulted, and everyone is involved in policy development. I'm not saying you put everybody in a boardroom and have a great big meeting and develop policies together, but later on we're going to take a look at how this can actually work, right, for everybody, in the workplace. Now, workplace strategies for inclusivity, these, like I said, should be supported by leadership, right? Because when leadership supports diversity and inclusion, then it encourages all the employees to develop and progress, right? And any barriers faced by diverse groups like LGBTQIA, PWD, which in the Philippines means people with disabilities, or maybe we can say differently abled people, single parents, people of color, right, are identified, and certain actions are taken to make sure that all of the barriers are addressed, right? And also, I mean, we need to see that little footnote down there that each organization must be aware of any potential tensions within the workplace, and they would take action, right, to anticipate and address these issues. Now, there is an importance to this, and what will the company benefit from being diverse and inclusive, right? Because having a company culture with respect as a foundation will result into these things, and these are just a few things, right? But this is really more for the benefit of the company, the corporation. Basically, number one is really productivity, right? Where a productive workplace will have highly motivated employees who will definitely do well at their job, and this would result in your higher performance and productivity. Definitely a lot more business could come in because of your productivity, and it also attracts and retains the best employees. And this is a benefit towards your talent acquisition and employee retention process. And of course, I mean, if you're diverse and inclusive, it will attract clients and retain valuable customers, right? Current clients who share the same vision as your company. And this is truly helpful, right, to business development and client retention. So, diversity inclusion is not only something that can benefit your employees, but can benefit your company, as a business as well. Now, everybody talks about employee equality, and this is an essential part of making sure that your workplace, is diverse and inclusive, and there is equity. That's why we have DEI. DEI essentially means diversity, equity, and inclusivity, right? And when we talk about employment equality, this really goes towards fair treatment for people, in every facet of life. And again, we're going to go through these different markers right here, like gender, race, difference in ability, religion, nationality, so GSC or age. So GSC, for our audience, this is actually an acronym which stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics. Right? And let's go back to equality. Essentially, this is promoting an individual's right to be different by enabling every employee to attain their goals. And you can do this, right, by making adjustments in the system, to meet the needs of all of your employees. And that is real equity, right? The primary branches of equality are actually diversity and inclusion, which we defined earlier. Now, equality in the workplace will definitely ensure that people are given equal opportunities, right, with equal pay, and ensure that they are well accepted for their differences, because it creates an inclusive and conducive work environment, right, where people will feel secure and happy. And it ensures removing any chances of discrimination in the workplace. And later, we're going to go a little bit through what discrimination in the workplace actually means. Right? So, how do we promote workplace equality? Right? How do we do this, effectively? Now, first, we need to understand, right, that there will always be common pitfalls in DEI implementation, because companies who are planning to or starting to go towards a more inclusive approach must also be mindful that there could be pitfalls, right? What will slow us down, and what are the potential roadblocks? What are these pitfalls, and what should we be looking out for? And there are just three things here that we have here. The first one is tokenism. And I decided to get, a definition from Merriam-Webster, which defines tokenism as the practice of doing something such as, hiring a person who belongs to a minority group only to prevent criticism and do it for show, right? Give an appearance that people are being treated fairly. Um, that is tokenism. And basically, it drives us to our next point, right? Which we will get to in a little bit, right? But we need to understand, a simple definition of what diversity, equity, and inclusivity is before we get there, right? So diversity really talks about the diverse workplace population. Equity talks about access, right? That everybody has access to resources, to facilities, compensation and benefits, right? And inclusivity talks about welcoming and accepting environment. Tokenism does not have real DNI. Tokenism will probably only have diversity, but everything else, you know, might be ignored. Okay. And what is the next one? The next one is closing the loop, right? So, like we said, sometimes we hire people, there are companies that hire people who are diverse but don't follow through on it. Unfortunately, that happens. But we can avoid, that by actually closing the loop, right? So sometimes there are companies that don't do this, but this is not an easy feat. But closing the loop really is following through on the initial actions leading towards DEI. And it's the best way to provide DEI friendly workplace for your employees. Closing the loop always starts with awareness. It starts and then it goes over to collaboration, which is your focus group discussion with people of diversity. And then your focus group discussion, would go into policy making. Policy making would involve this long process of creating the policy, making sure it's fair, it's equitable, looking at how we can implement within the confines of the laws that we're working with, depending on the country that we're in, eventually implementing those policies, and of course evaluating the effect of these policies, which then would go back, into the loop of providing awareness. So these are essential steps for us to be able to close the loop. And the last item really is it's all year round. You know how sometimes people would tell us that, okay, diversity and inclusion only happens when it's, let's say, Pride Month, right? Or when it's, Women's Month in March, right? So unfortunately, if this is how we are treating it, right, as companies and employers, then we are doing a great disservice to our employees who are diverse, because diversity and inclusion initiatives remain applicable and timely today, then they should be an integral part of an organization's culture year round, because they need to help employees connect, right, to a purpose. So this is quoted from Ann Gilson's article, One Digital. And really, what we're trying to drive here is that it's not seasonal. It's not limited to being just a campaign or an awareness campaign, because diversity, equity, and inclusion must be celebrated and implemented consistently. Where we see that there are policies and guidelines that need to be reviewed and updated, together with everything, right? And what runs our company, or our company handbook. Right? Okay, so those are the three things, the three pitfalls that we need to watch out for, right? The first one, as we mentioned earlier, was tokenism. The second one is the inability to close the loop. And the third one is, limiting it to campaigns, right? And, short strategies. So now we go to actually promoting it, right? And like any other company or corporate value, it's very essential, driving equality in the workplace. This takes dedication, like a lot of dedication. This takes a team to do, actually, education, and effective change management. The objective really is to make sure that, the concepts of equality resonate in our HR policies and our guidelines, is basically meaning that as a company we walk the talk, and like we mentioned earlier, it needs to be part of the end-to-end experience of each employee. Now, I mean, really, what's the benefit the company if it's end to end? Because some people would tell me, well, all these policies are applicable only to our current employees and not really the ones we don't hire. um, Actually, everything that we do as a company affects how people see us, right? How people will understand what our strategies are, what our stand is on diversity and inclusion. So it's important for us to even start at the application process, where we treat people, with fair policies, with fair guidelines, as we take them through that process. Why? Because even if they don't make it there, they will always remember how fair and how equal they were treated during the application process, and they will talk about that, right? And that is something, that can help your company. Or if we're not doing it right, that's something that could probably open us up to opportunities, which, we need to recognize and do something about. Now, a little bit more on how to promote equality in the workplace. Essentially, this ensures that people are given equal opportunities and equal pay because they're accepted, creates an inclusive and conducive work environment, and it removes any chances of discrimination, which is something that we are going to touch on as well. Okay. How do we do it? First, we start from hiring, because the best way to create, a balanced workforce is through great hiring practices. We need to take a holistic approach to recruitment, right? And remove any prejudices that might exist. And, a lot of companies have started this a long time ago by removing photos in the resumes that they request from applicants. That's one. Other things that we can do here is also take a look at how people would like to be addressed. What are their pronouns? What are the names that they live by? And these are things that, will make the hiring process a lot more comfortable for every single person that goes through it. And having a great hiring process will ensure that you take full advantage of the talent that's out there, right? And it exists simply because you embrace DEI. Next is, to focus on training, mentorship programs, right? Because these need to be reevaluated so that we can accommodate a diverse workforce. It needs to be global throughout the training curriculum, and conduct one-on-one meetings with mentors to guide employees in every step, and recognize that we have employees who are different, right? They are from diverse backgrounds. So very important that they are also included in the considerations when we create our training and mentorship programs. And most commonly, bridging the pay gap. So just really looking at the salaries of the employees and making sure that the salaries are balanced, especially between different genders, age, ages, and even nationalities. Introduce a salary alignment if we need to do that, revisit it, right? But this definitely needs to be bridged, right? I mean, before it used to be bridging the pay gap between men and women, but now you have all other things to consider. And sometimes, we can still see that there are pay gaps, right? But depending what we perceive the people, right, to be. And of course, we need to communicate. Equality is not just accepting people from different backgrounds, but also celebrating them. And so we must take proactive measures to improve communication within the organization by educating our employees on diversity and inclusion, which in turn will create a safe space, right, for every employee to voice their concerns, be unafraid. They will encourage brave and authentic conversations, inclusive meetings as well. And aside from salary, the same thing, benefits. We must revisit our compensation and benefit structure and make sure that we are providing the help that our employees need, when we look into their compensation and benefits. Simply, we can say that, we can evaluate it by asking ourselves, are all our employees getting the same benefits like healthcare, life insurance, paid time off, right? So these are things that we also need to take a look at. And earlier we mentioned engaging leadership because we must engage them. Their responsibility, really, as leaders, is to lead by example, to emulate the right attitude and uphold the company values. Because when employees see that leaders are walking the talk and speaking right about DEI, they will have role models and allies and leaders who genuinely care about everyone. And sometimes people ask me this question, right? What about the law? Well, the law provides guidelines on the minimum required standards for employees to be employment to be gainful, and there's absolutely no law that tells us that we cannot do more for our employees, because sometimes if we stick to the minimum standards of employment rights and guidelines, maybe it is expected that our employees will also give us the minimum standard in performance. So going the extra mile will encourage everyone to go the extra mile as well. And finally, really quickly touching on workplace discrimination. What is it really all about? It manifests in the workplace, right? Through slurs or comments used to describe negative performance, using a person's disability, condition, age, sex, using all those qualifiers, right? Unfortunately, it still happens. And this could lead to, not recognizing talent by not giving praise or promotion, right? Because of these perceived differences, and excluding people from activities because of these differences that we see, right? And sometimes even assigning tasks to persons based on their perceived skills. And lastly, cracking jokes that will put employees in a bad or negative light using what their differences are against them. This is all part, of how discrimination manifests and happens in the workplace. And there are things we can do to fight that, right? Calling out the behavior, educating employees, working with HR or human resources, recognizing the basic rights of your employees, right? And supporting local anti-discrimination laws if you have them, right? And definitely celebrating, right, everyone's diversity. Now, to date, in some parts of the world, there may be few or no laws that protect the rights of diverse people, based on all these qualifiers. And this is kind of why we need to do our part, right, in the corporate community to push diversity and inclusion, because we need to support and encourage and retain our diverse employees because they're productive parts of our ecosystem, like in the office. So that is the end of diversity and inclusion for today. And I certainly hope, that if you guys have any questions or comments, you can hit me up on our socials, which will be shared in the chat box later on. And I thoroughly enjoyed having this discussion with all of you. So thank you. Thank you so much for today's session.
Thank you, Fire. That was really on
Fire. That was
fire.
fire.
That
I
was on
learned a
fire.
lot from that. Thank you. Thank you so much. I will definitely rewatch the
Yeah.
recording because I felt like I needed to take more notes. It is indeed, something that we all need. And I personally am an I try my best to be an ally. I don't know if I'm already there, but I think it's really about that effort, taking that step,
Right.
really kind of like doing what you could, right? And these, inclusion and diversity efforts in the workplace, it's really close to my heart. Because I've worked on a project actually with LGBTQ Workplace Community Center. Shout out to my teammates on that project. They are here, Wyatt and Nikki. It was truly a meaningful and life-changing project for me, because that's the first project that kind of like opened my eyes in terms
Right.
of, wow, it's really something that is not there, at least not as known in the Philippines. For example, um, banks and my former company, we still have uniforms that identifies male and female, and so it's just sad, because what if you don't identify as a male or female? And just like what Fire said, all just say that you have a diverse group, but there's
Yeah.
no follow through. Like, for example, the policies that you have, um, as simple as medical insurance, or you cannot enlist your partner as a beneficiary or a dependent,
Dependent.
things
Yeah.
like that. These are things that I feel we really still need to push for and to strive for, to create awareness. And I think it's great that we have these kinds of sessions.
Mm.
But I'm grateful that I belong to a company now that really has efforts on DEI, right? What about
Yeah.
you, Gerald? What are
And
your favorite takeaways from that?
yeah, you would know, because we work on these things a lot, and I resonated with what Fire shared at the beginning when he was sharing his story, and it's really sad because for most people of the community, it's still a reality, it's still an experience. A lot of us are have now. And for most of the advocate work that we do, it's sad that we had to experience like discrimination
Mm-hmm.
first before we really
Yeah.
make become more passionate about the advocacy. So again, also thankful that we work in a company that promotes such culture, and I think it's also a huge call to action for everyone here, regardless of what level of influence you have in your companies or workplaces. Highlighting what Fire mentioned in his talk, having that proactive and genuine effort to create the culture
Yeah.
of DEI in your
That's
company
true.
can start also from you. So you don't have to be like the boss
That's
in
true. That's
your
true.
company. Call out bad behavior, speak up, and make sure that everyone's considered, heard, and listened to. So yeah, it's really just a topic I feel so passionate
I
about.
know. That's
Obviously.
actually, I think, the reason why it was you who we have had in mind to co-host this event with us, because we know that you're also a DEI advocate. And again, in the workplace, it's not just gender equality, gender
Right.
inclusion,
Yeah,
also
definitely.
multicultural. Like, for example,
Right.
I know that some companies would require their, let's say, non-Catholic, non-Christian members to
Mm,
participate in Christmas parties, to celebrate with them.
mm,
And of course, that's not
right.
it's very exclusive, and we don't
Mm,
acknowledge the diversity in that. So many things we can do. So you can connect with Fire and Side B Philippines. I know that they are also open to invitations
right.
for work sessions, I mean for workshops and for learning sessions. So please do connect with Fire and Side B Philippines at Side B Phil.